Our panel this morning or this afternoon, Julia Reed, Under the Garden and Gun. We want to thank the sponsor of the panel, Community Foundation for Mississippi. Our moderator or person to do the introductions for the panel is Malcolm White, Executive Director for the Mississippi Arts Commission and member of the Mississippi Book Festival Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're glad that you're here. I'll tell you the truth, I'm not the moderator. I'm just a friend of the panel. And so I'm going to make it quick and turn it over to the experts. This is Julia's show. No. It is Julia Under the Gun, the Garden and Gun, and David DiBenedetto. How do you pronounce your last name?
DiBenedetto.
DiBenedetto is with us. David is a... Benedetto,
yeah,
sorry.
But everybody says Dave D, so you... Yes.
David D. Yeah. Dave's a native of Savannah, Georgia. He now lives in the Deep South. He was in the New York publishing business for a very long time with Men's Journal, Field and Stream, which is a magazine that I grew up with, and of course now with Garden and Gun, and we're glad that you're here, sir. His first book is called On the Run, An Angler's Journey Down the Striper Coast. That's a HarperCollins publication. But he will be signing S is for Southern at the signing tent at 1:45.
That's correct.
And we're glad you're here. Julia Reed needs no introduction. But I will say this, that she's been a friend for a long time. She is a contributing editor at Garden and Gun. She's worked for other magazines. They will remain unmentioned
including
here.
Mr. Meacham's Newsweek.
Oh, very good. But she has books.
This is why I had to come.
Got to stand up for yourself, John.
I know it.
Her books include But Mama Always Put Vodka in the Sangria, Ham Biscuits, Hostess Gowns and Other Southern Specialties, Queen of the Turtle Derby, and Other Southern Phenomena.
It'll take too long.
Oh, it'll take too long. Okay. But her newest book is entitled South Toward Home. I would like to say that we appreciate that Julia lives in New Orleans sometime, but also in Greenville. And she's been very hands-on in the creating and the promoting of the Delta Hot Tamale Festival.
Go on with your bad self.
That's right.
As a plug. Thank you.
And she will be signing...
Third weekend in October, y'all.
That's right. If you haven't been, it's fantastic. She has a literary...
Culinary mashup. Garden and Gun is one of our sponsors. Mr.
As I said, I will be gone soon, and Julia will be moderating the panel. But anyway, her signing is at 3, so I don't know when John's signing is.
I don't either, but I'm sure it'll be
It's
lovely.
about 3, too, I think.
Yeah, but anyway, we're so glad the three of you are here. I'm going to get the heck out of the way and let this
Don't go
thing
far,
happen.
Malcolm.
Welcome.
Well, I arrived here with my dear friend, Mr. Meacham, who announced that he thought he would be a great addition to the panel. And,
I did.
I agreed. We call him a fog, a friend of Garden and Gun.
I am. I am.
It's funny, I get asked a lot what it's like to be the editor of Garden and Gun, and I have two. Well, that's the main question I get, and I often say that it's an embarrassment of riches, and this is a very much an example of that I get to come down to Jackson and host a panel with Julia, which is basically like throwing up a softball and letting her hit it out of the park. And then Julia calls 10 minutes before and says, "Hey, is it okay if John Meacham joins us?" Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, we'll give him something to say.
What? But this is appropriate that it's in a church. Are we in a basement?
No.
Because Dave and I spend a lot of time in church basements as part of what we call Julia's Editors Anonymous.
Oh, please.
Because we're addicted to her, but we shouldn't be. Because to edit Julia is to really put one's Christian patience to the most extraordinary test.
He's
Dave,
exaggerating a tiny, tiny, tiny bit.
actually, Dave,
No, I have I have an email exchange between Julia and I to back John's.
we're on step 6.
Yeah. So I will say this: the other question I get most often is, "What's it like to edit Julia Reed?" I'll tell you what it's like. So this is an email that I sent to Julia. She was writing a story on the artist David Bates. When I talk about shipping in this email, that means it's the time when the magazine is due at the printer. You have 2 or 3 days left to go. If you miss your ship date, then the printer has to push your printing date back. You don't get on newsstands on time. I mean, colossal problems. And when you've gone that far down the cycle, you can't just pull 6 pages out of thin air and replace them with something else, at least not anything good. So Julia sort of takes it to the extreme. Anyway,
I work best under like fearful circumstances.
So this is an email from me to Julia. I'm at work. It's like 9:00 p.m. Do not take my lack of pestering as a sign that I don't need your piece. I'm deep in this issue, shipping pages to the printer, the cover, etc., and I don't have time to hound you. So please send your copy ASAP. I need it. I really effing need it. So this is what I get back. Just landed in Dallas this second. Polished up at least 1,500 words before the computer ran out of juice.
Well, that's a really good one.
Gonna send that when I get to the hotel, and we'll finish the rest tonight after dinner with Laura Bush. And here's the kicker.
It's true.
She doesn't drink, so it will happen. Yeah, that's my answer to what it's like to work with Julia.
He's a really super patient man, though. I mean, it's horrible to say this because I should not. I mean, this is like y'all can just beat up on Julia panel. That's fine. But my editor at Vogue, Michael Boudreau, used to call my mother. I mean, she's in the phone book in Greenville, and he would call my mother, and just you could hear he has this really strong, trumpety, nasal voice, and she would play back some of his his messages sometimes, and it's hysterical. I need her. Mrs. Reed, it's Michael Boudreau. Do you know where your daughter is? I mean, I'm like 45 years old. It was kind of embarrassing, but anyway. John and I were just doing a podcast together, and with Madam First Lady, the wonderful podcaster interviewer that now I've just blocked out of my brain. But anyway, she did a great job, and we were talking about what, she's like, I'm going to not try to get too much into the writing process. And, John and I both could agree that the writing process pretty much just is sit down and type. But fear and the knowledge that you won't get paid or the magazine will have like a hole in it if you don't finally do it is good. But the problem with me and Garden Gun is because this column actually has an illustration, and the person that, like, the creative person that draws me looking like a fruitcake every month, he takes a little longer for his work than I do, apparently, and he likes to know what's going on ahead of time. So Dave will call me to start beating the drum, like, I need a topic, I need a topic, I need a topic. So finally, I just get sick of that and throw out a topic, and then...
Yeah, which is like France. I'm going to France. I'm like, oh, really? Cool, great. So what are we going to draw?
So but I do give the man some hints and stuff, but
Yeah,
then I
after
get
another
completely...
week of pestering.
All right, so shut up. So anyway, but the problem is, then he's drawn this illustration, and one of the things that Mr. Meacham and I were both also talking about is you don't really, I did a whole column one time about, like, people say you write just like you talk, and I don't actually, but I take that as a compliment because it means that I have a voice, but a voice is not something just like you're spewing in a tape recorder and then somebody can transcribe it. My thoughts really do come pretty clear because I'm typing them. Like if I'm not writing something down, I'm totally inarticulate. Or at least a lot less articulate than I am on the page, and which perfect example right here. And but so that, and I do think that that's true of a lot of writers. You don't really know what you're going to say, or you haven't organized your thoughts until they're on the page, which is a problem because then I've got this illustration that has no relation to what I'm writing about that I got to loop back up and like say, oh yeah, and then I did yada yada. Yeah. But
and then I went to France.
Yeah, right.
David?
Yes.
Why don't I ask
Julia? I will say this. This guy's like the,
lightning
teacher's pet. When the column is due, when you
right.
ask John to write something, he turns it in, 2 days early. Let me know if this is okay. Oh, yeah, this will be okay, thanks.
This is the guy you hated in
the
school.
distinction is that I have sat in the same kind of chair that Dave has, and so you know that even if it's not very good, if it's early, they love you.
Yeah, they do.
Our friend Evan Thomas used to say when he first went to work for Time magazine in the 1980s that his goal was to be faster than the best person and better than the fastest, which is basically the key to journalism. The key to show business, as Dolly Parton once said, is be ready. Because somebody's going to call you and say, I need X or Y. And as long as you can just show up and do it, it's essential. The damnable thing about Julia, of course, is that it's worth the wait.
Yes,
Thank
right.
you
I
very
did, and I'm
much.
sorry, I did not get to that part. That was I just rode off into the ha-ha sunset. But it is always worth the wait.
Always worth the
yeah.
wait. I will say this
Y'all
one
sweet.
more point about Julia before we move on to
careful.
Julia is I don't know how many of you all have friends like this. You probably have spouses like this. Do you all have a situation in your life where you will suggest something to your spouse or a friend, you know, you really should do X or Y, and they
here
go,
we go.
you know, maybe. And then you go to a dinner or something, and someone else says, oh, you know what, you really should do X or Y. And they go, that's such a good idea. I have spent a quarter century of my life having Julia call me after I have said you should do X or Y, saying, well, goddamn, finally, you know, Dave DiBenedetto said I should do this. I think it's really smart. Goddamn. And I'm like, well, you know, I said that. She, well, you didn't say exactly quite that way. I don't think so. So I spend most, and in fact, Julia.
He's totally exaggerating. I take all of his
I
advice.
refer you, if you think I'm exaggerating, I refer you to her acknowledgments in her new book, her fabulous new book, where she admits this in print. That she says, I rarely take his advice, but I still like him.
No, that's not what I said.
Which may be the most passive-aggressive acknowledgement in history.
All right, if I had do you have a book? No, I don't even have a book. Or I
They've all sold out.
I could refute that. No, I'm very lucky to have worked with both of these wonderful, wonderful human beings, and David has been incredibly fabulous to work with because, you know, Garden and Gun is still we're still inventing it, don't you think?
Yeah.
And, you know, my column is called The High and the Low, which kind of encapsulates what living in the South is like, what the magazine is like, and
Encapsulates the name.
yeah, I mean the
from
name
the club.
both of us get the question all the time. What's up with the name? And let me just say for the record, everybody in this room, it is Garden and Gun. I don't know what it is. It's like everybody says guns and gardens. I don't get it. I was on the radio the other day, and this lovely woman called in. I was on Point on NPR, and this lady called in, and she was so sweet, and we were talking about gumbo. And she said, I just want you to know that Guns N' Roses is my favorite magazine. And it's
If
kind of,
only.
you know, it's
If
sort of
only.
like, well, I know, that'd be cool, right?
It would be
But I want you to know that, so one of the answers to the question, so we'll just get this over with, is Garden and Gun is not about, you know, guns and ammo.
It's not about gardens. It's
It's
about
not all that
guns.
much about gardens. I mean, we have the odd garden in
yeah,
there. We
yeah,
do. We're getting ready to put Mr. Meacham's garden in there. He doesn't even know. That's why you're spending all
Neither
that
do
money
I.
on that terrace. Anyway,
That's why those people are in the yard.
yeah. So, there was a club in Charleston where the magazine is based called the Garden and Gun Club. And my friend Courtney Cowart was making her debut at the St. Cecilia Society, which is the high part of my column. And here we're going immediately into the low because I think the morning after that party, I woke up on a park bench with her uncle. But I digress. But and I was supposed to be on an early morning flight back to Newsweek, to the Washington Bureau, where one of my many important jobs, I was like 19 to 18, was working the switchboard, one of those switchboards like Ernestine on Laugh-In used to do, and I was always screwing it up. But anyway, I missed the switchboard that day since I was in the park and stuff. And so her mother had to call the bureau chief and say there was terrible weather or some BS that he never believed. But it was great because that night the reprobate uncle took us to the Garden and Gun Club, which was like this fabulous bar, which had like this total microcosm of everybody you want to hang out with in the South. There's like sailors on leave in Charleston, a couple of transvestites, you know, some total snobby Charlestonians, you know, with the Gucci's and no socks and stuff. Just this, I mean, like just this wild mix of people in this great setting. I remember ceiling fans, and there's a balcony around the place, and you could look down, and it was like this great place.
The great thing was, and I wish I had been able to go. What I hear about it is that when the bars closed at midnight, the Garden and Gun Club was able to remain open because it was officially a club. So everybody, when they were toasted out of their mind, ended up at the Garden and Gun Club till 2 or 3 in the morning and had the most memorable time of their night, of their life. So that is, and the you know,
If they could remember.
yeah, right. And I came to Garden and Gun a year after it was founded, so I wasn't part of the naming of it. In fact, I was sitting at my desk in New York City when somebody walked in with the magazine and threw it on my desk, and I looked at the name and I laughed like most people did. I thought, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. I was, I turned into a New York editor snob. But then I opened it up and I started to just look at the pages and I thought, wow, this is such a great magazine and it has such great potential. And, I think it was probably 6 months later, I was on my way down to Charleston to work for it. So, obviously a huge fan. Where was I going? Oh yeah, the Garden and Gun name. So right, it was. I wasn't there for it, but the CEO and the founder and the founding editor were having dinner at the space where the Garden and Gun Club used to exist, and they were trying to figure out a name for this magazine. They were thinking about calling it The South. They were thinking about calling it Due South, and then someone just threw out the idea of Garden and Gun, and it stuck. And so there we have it.
It hurts us sometimes because a lot of people don't want to be affiliated with the gun name, and I don't blame them. But we're not promoting school shootings. We just occasionally have a piece on quail hunting.
Right.
But it's too late in the day now. But that is one thing that bugs us. But on the flip side of that is it's so weird. And especially in the beginning, it was so exotic that all my Yankee friends loved having it like on their coffee tables because it would be like this thing. And now it's people all over the place read it, not because it's exotic. I was in Vermont not long ago, and this woman comes chasing after me. I judged some competition at a school, and this woman comes chasing after me. She's like, I just want you to know, Garden and Gun's my favorite magazine. I thought, what? But Vermont is kind of a garden and gun state. You forwarded me a letter from a woman in Arizona the other day. So that makes me feel good. We've got a much wider reach than just the South.
I think, not to get into numbers, but 40% of the circulation is outside or beyond the Mason-Dixon line. And New York and California
astonishing.
are 2 of the top 10 states in terms of circulation. They're, number 8 and 9 or something like that, but they're in the top 10.
Well, I can brag. This doesn't have anything to do with me, so I can brag on David, and I think John will probably, John and I are Southerners we all three of us who went Southerners who went north toward home, which is Willie Morris's great memoir and what I was riffing on when I titled my current book South Toward Home. But we went north toward home and to make our name in the biz and all that kind of stuff when you had to do that, when you had to be in New York. But when I was in New York, it was so, David and I have talked about this 1,000 times. It was so exotic. The reason I became a food columnist for the New York Times is not because I applied for the job. It didn't occur to me that I could get paid to write about food. And I was working for Vogue, and I had a party, and this is in the 90s. It wasn't all that long ago, and it was in the late 90s and mid to late. And I had a party for the editor who used to call my mother, and he was leaving Vogue probably because I drove him out of there. And so I had a big goodbye party for him at my house. So it wasn't my usual crowd, because my usual crowd was actually mostly expatriate Southerners and Brits, because we always had sort of a fondness for each other. And so I had what I always have, which was what my mother always had before me, which was some deviled eggs and some pimento cheese sandwiches and some ham biscuits. I used to, before FedEx, Marshall's biscuits would be you could FedEx them to your apartment. I used to hand carry them on planes in bags because I'm not going to make thousands of biscuits for people. But anyway, and you couldn't buy biscuits in New York. So I'd have ham biscuits, and then I'd have a big old bowl of lump crab meat like they have at Galatoire's Crabby Maison. People were looking in this bowl what the hell? And they'd never seen it. Literally at this particular party, people were asking me what was the deviled egg. I'm like, who has never seen a deviled egg? This is astonishing deprivation. We were supposed to be the ones that went through these decades and centuries of deprivation, and these people had never seen a deviled egg. Give me a break. So,
wasn't there Popeyes involved?
No, I used to have a lot of Popeyes parties too,
all right.
but that was another time. But anyway, so I have all this normal food. Thank you very much. And this was the era when people were, I had tenderloin on a Sister Schubert's roll. Hello. So, and then they had you go to these cocktail parties, which they tell you, from 6 to 8 you had to leave. And they pass you like some dried satay on a stick, you know, or like a snow pea pipe with something. And then, you know, what would you rather eat, right? So these people went bananas. And, I mean, people were chasing the trays around and stuff. It was hilarious. So it was a very late night, and I was slumbering the next morning, and the phone rang, and this guy that I didn't even meet, who was an editor at the New York Times Magazine, said, "Have you ever thought about writing about food?" I swear to God. I mean, it was like the deviled egg that did it, and I got the job. They offered me, like, every other week. I wrote the food column for the New York Times Magazine for 4 years, and then Mr. Meacham poached me, and I did it for Newsweek in its last glorious days. And, but the point of that long-winded story is not that I'm a genius, because anybody could have gotten the job in this audience, frankly, because y'all know how to make a pimento cheese sandwich, but was that Southern food, even though we had known for ages that it's the superior food of our country, I mean, would you rather eat, I mean, I don't know, go to Minnesota and eat something or eat Southern food? So it has always been superior, and so, but people are now figuring that out, but it really has been, I swear, and I'm not just blowing smoke, because they don't really pay me hardly anything, so, which is true, when they pay me at all, and but I think the garden and gun effect has been something. I mean, like now you go to a bar in Brooklyn and there are big, like, bowls of pimento cheese up and down and
boiled
pickled okra
peanuts
because it's chic, you know, boiled peanuts, and everybody's got fried chicken. I mean, I was visiting my colleague and great buddy Roy Blunt Jr. in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, and we went to a restaurant called the Prairie Whale, and I had the best fried chicken I've ever had in my life. I mean, like, you know, so now we taught everybody how to do stuff that they needed to learn a long time ago.
Yeah, and you know, bourbon certainly, you know, I think gardening gun started in 2007, and I think that was a time when folks were learning to appreciate where things came from and things that had a story, and you know, that's something that the South has always been about. You know, back then, farm to table was still fairly new, and
we were always farm to table
that's what
by
I was going to say,
necessity.
right? And that was somebody I read recently. I was talking to a writer who said, "Yeah, farm to table was the pickup truck." But there was an appreciation for that, and certainly, you know, if anything that I lament is that it's very hard to get Pappy Van Winkle now, but it was really easy
created that
10
monster.
years ago, or not easy, but much easier. So much so that I was talking to Julian Van Winkle's son, Preston, and he was doing a Pappy Van Winkle tasting, and he said that even at home he doesn't drink Van Winkle bourbon because he feels so guilty. Because no one can get it. So for the record, he drinks Buffalo Trace.
Can I bring up one other part of your genre? At Dave's invitation some years ago, he asked me to write a column about our dog, a Springer Spaniel named Ellie. And I used it as a metaphor because we had just moved from New York to Nashville.
Well, the venue is the Good Dog column, which is the most popular.
Right, yeah, the Good Dog column
You all know this.
was in the first issue and has been in every issue since. And it is certainly the most popular thing that we do. And I'll be honest, sometimes we jokingly call it the dead dog column because most of the dogs end up dead. But we're always on the lookout for somebody who's going to write about their living dog,
But that's,
which
Mr.
John
Meacham,
did. And yeah, John's column somehow.
but, you
in
know,
the dog
ultimately
column-
they're all gonna die.
Somehow in a dog column, he had Henry Kissinger, the Louisiana Purchase, and Thomas Jefferson. But
As
I
one
did,
does.
that's true.
As one does.
Yeah.
All right.
That's true. That's true. And I
So
think
go ahead,
I
yeah.
think I turned it in early. But so I wrote it, and it was great fun. And I was at the 30th anniversary of George Herbert Walker Bush's inauguration. I'm sure y'all were all there. In College Station, I was standing in a barbecue line, getting ready to get my barbecue, and a woman walks up to me, weeping. I mean, truly, not hysterical, but deeply, deeply emotional. And she says, "Oh my God, I have to thank you." And I said, "Well, yes, ma'am. You know, how are you?" She said, "You did so much to get me through Sally's death." And I'm sitting there thinking, who do I know named Sally who died? And I thought, Sally Quinn's still kicking, Sally Smith's still kicking, Sally Mann is still kicking. I just saw her. Jesus Christ. And I'm doing the full Peter Taylor wasp mask. Yes, yes. And it finally turns out it was her Springer Spaniel. And her dog had died, and she had read this column as grief therapy. And I've written about a lot of dead white guys. And no one has ever walked up to me and said, "You got me through Grandpa's death because of Andrew Jackson."
The power of that column is really amazing. I mean, the dogs that are alive that get written about, we often get care packages sent from readers who, maybe they're a Cocker Spaniel fan or what have you, and that column was about that. And they'll send dog toys to the dogs that are written about. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old son and a 2-year-old.
Are you talking about the dogs or the
and a 2-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old boykin, and I for whatever reason, decided it would be smart to bring a new puppy into the house.
It's good thinking.
Yeah, real good thinking.
A lab. I remember.
So I brought a lab puppy into the house, and haven't slept since. But I get asked this question often. What's the difference? Do you like your boykin better or your lab better? And it's hard to say. But here's the difference. When my boykin say we're in a field somewhere, a dog park, what have you, and I call my boykin. Her name is Pritchard. Pritchard. Nothing happens. Pritchard. Then she looks back, and I can see it in her face. She's like, "You know what? I've got to pee. I'm gonna look for a perfect place to pee for about 5 minutes, and then I can tell what she's doing, and then she'll pee." And I'm like, "Okay, Pritchard, come on." And she's like, "Yeah, I think I'll come your way." So my lab, she can be 200 yards away, and I can say, "Hey," her name is Story. Story. And she's like, "Did you just call me? Did you just call me? I'm on my way. I'm on my way." And she'll run at 100 miles an hour. And when she gets there, she's like, "Oh, well, did you call me? I can't wait to be here. What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" So that is the difference between my boykin and my lab.
My favorite lab story. Has Curtis Wilkie ever written a good dog?
Yeah.
Curtis is a great Mississippi journalist, as you know, and one of my good friends. And Curtis's voice is inimitable, but I'm going to try. I walked into Curtis. He had a lab named Binks after Binks Bowling in the Moviegoer, and he got another one after that named Willie for Willie Morris. And so they're very literary labs, but hungry. And I walked into Curtis's house in the French Quarter, and he had this giant leather sofa that was like super huge. It was almost as long as this thing, and very deep and thick, and it was gone. And I said, "Curtis, what happened to the sofa?" "Binks ate it." Then Curtis got married, and the dogs had to go outside. It's a big bummer. But we write about more than dogs and food, do we not? It's Garden and Gun,
Swanee
John and David?
and
University of the South, best understood as a combination of Downton Abbey and Deliverance.
Have you said that before, John? I
No.
can't.
No, it just came to me. We did that. We've written about Shelby Foote's Civil War reissue of the great books.
Right.
Do y'all know the story behind that quickly? Do y'all know Shelby wrote 7 billion...
John works for Random House, by the way, which published
7 billion words on the Civil War, right?
in longhand.
Right. That started out as a commission from Bennett Cerf, the head of Random House, for a 20,000-word meditation on the centennial of Sumter.
After
And-
he'd written that novel. Wasn't it after he'd written Shallow, and they said, "Yeah, that's a good idea to do that."
And so Foote takes the commission, realizes that perhaps he needs a little bit more than 20,000 words. It's the greatest example of mission creep in literary history. And what I love about publishing is Bennett Cerf's second call to get the little book was Robert Penn Warren, who wrote 20,000 words and got done with it. But we reissued a set of those and had a great. And I will say this: I write for Time Magazine and the New York Times, and I get more genuine You can always tell when people have actually read what you've done. there's an old saying in Washington that the three most insincere words are "loved your peace," and so, but what the Dave's magazine actually produces a much more visceral connection. You can
It
tell
really
people
does. You
about
get completely, like you're helping people mourn.
Mourn, yeah.
No, but it's true. But just as an aside, when you guys reissued the Civil War trilogy, Shelby's great trilogy, they had a little extra book to go along with the anniversary edition, and all kind of scholars weighed in on Shelby's assessment of the Civil War and stuff. But John paid me the great compliment of asking me to write Shelby Foote's Greenville, because as a lot of you know here, he grew up in my hometown of Greenville, Mississippi, and it was such a great exercise for me because, you know, there's some, I mean, I grew up in a place where people always say, well, what made you be a writer? It's like, you know, to a lot of people that seems exotic, but I mean, being a writer in Greenville is like being a plumber. I mean, like everybody was a writer. I mean, it was like no big whoop. And I mean, we had a Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper. My neighbors were writers, Frankie and Bern Keating. A lot of y'all remember them. And Frankie and Bern got paid to go on these like incredibly expensive, long, glamorous trips. And then, I mean, I had the best show and tells of any kid in my age group because they would come back and I'd just take all their stuff and go. But I'm like, well, that is such a good gig. I didn't realize I was going to get the last of the magazine heyday. Nobody pays you to do anything anymore. But that was anyway. But Shelby once said, if you know, people say, well, why are there so many writers in Greenville? And Shelby had this great line: if William Alexander Percy had been born in Tupelo, all the writers would have been from Tupelo. And that's true. So that was a good, John gave me a great opportunity to sort of go down the rabbit hole of Greenville's rich cultural history. And God knows that the readers of Garden and Gun are sick of Greenville, because I'm like, you know, I'm going to get a key to, I should get a key to the city if I hadn't already gotten one. I see Benji Nelkin back there. Will you have a word with the mayor, please? But I mean, because I do flaunt, or flog, or flaunt, whatever you want to say, the merits of my home territory, the Delta, a lot.
So, this book, Garden and Guns, S's for Southern, came out last fall, and John and Julia are both in it, and it's, you know, it is an encyclopedia of the South, but it's not an academic tome at all. It's more of a, you know, kind of a fun, rollicking, you know.
I've never known how you decided what subjects to throw in there. Was that like a scientific?
Far from scientific. I realized Jimmy Carter's not in there. But it was never meant to be everything, right? And a lot of what it was about was reaching out to the great writers at Garden and Gun and asking them what they were interested in writing about. One, though, we know we needed to hit the Civil War, and you know we had to do it. We had to do it in 600. We had to do it in 600 words. So
Best
I thought
email I've ever gotten. I'm sitting, you know, working on James Madison or somebody, and Dave pops up on the email. Would love a piece on the Civil War. Can you do it in 600 words?
Now, how many did you say Shelby wrote?
2 million.
Yeah.
2 million. But he's Shelby Foote, so I, you know.
And he did it on time and well. Julia wrote about the Doe's Eat Place and tamales in there as well. But I will
do
say,
that in my sleep now. It's kind of embarrassing, but
it's a fun book, and this is a little bit of a pitch, but there's one section in here that is on the Southern accent, something we can all relate to. And Daniel Wallace wrote it, who wrote Big Fish, which became the movie. Anyway, I'm going to read just a few lines. The Southern accent is one of our nation's greatest treasures. Its beauty rivals that of a songbird or the most resonant cello. Had the Southern accent not been invented, our ears would have fallen off long ago or become vestigial, fleshy cauliflowers hanging off the sides of our heads. For without the Southern accent, there would have been nothing much worth listening to. Someone somewhere can make a case that I'm exaggerating its importance to us people and to America, but I can assure you I am not. An accent is your vocal personality. It's like a hairstyle or your favorite pair of shoes. The only difference being that it's in your throat. There's a northern accent as well, and it's easily distinguishable from a southern accent, the same way a paper bag full of broken glass is distinguishable from a cashmere scarf. But when you leave the South,
This has had a very wide sail in the north.
but when you leave the South and head in other directions, accents tend to disappear. The song of the language is lost, and what you're left with is bland communication, meaning without music. Anyway,
That's
one of my
great.
little favorite. Yeah.
As long as he's plugging his books, which he's going to be signing. What was the first one? Southerner's Handbook.
Southerner's Handbook, yeah.
So he asked me to write about entertaining in there, and so I did, and there were a bunch of typos in there, and I got really mad, so I'm going to correct it now. One of the things I said about the, like, you know, I mean, I'm not Martha Stewart, and I wish I were, I'd be so much richer, but it would be hard to be Martha, and I would have had to go to jail, which, so, but anyway, you know, I didn't. So instead of writing about like how to have, you know, how to arrange flowers or whatever, I mean, one of the things that I've always said a great party needs is an element of danger, and that happens, in fact, when you mix Yankees with Southerners at a party. So my good
I
friend,
found that if you're there, it takes care of it.
my friend Ann McGee, my lifelong friend, I've written about our beer stand that we had when we were 4. If we'd stuck with that, I might be as rich as Martha. Anyway, so Anne, at her first marriage, which she calls her big party, she refuses to call it a wedding, and it didn't really count. And anyway, she's marrying this guy from New Jersey who happened to be the Polaner all-fruit heir. And these people were super serious, the Polaners. And so they all arrive in the Delta, and Ann's family is a combination of G's and McGee's, which is just right off the bat. Like, if you know a G or a McGee, anybody in this room, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, they're legion. Anyway, so Jody G was the bride's uncle. And so the Yankees come, and this is like before it was really all that big of a deal to, like, nobody was videotaping weddings, and we're thinking, man, nobody should really videotape this. This is going to be bad. And so, I mean, like, you just didn't really want this on videotape. I just knew it. And so at the rehearsal dinner, we're all, you know, all of us are standing up there making toasts, and we're singing songs and making fun of the bride. And I think I mentioned our beer stand and a few other super embarrassing things in her life. And we were musical and entertaining and funny. And then the groom's family gets up, and like the best man starts quoting Rudyard Kipling, and all the Southerners are now just drunk. I mean, like the head table, their 2 people have passed out, and so listening to these long toasts, and so finally, Jody G at about the 15th mention of Rudyard Kipling, because it was very obviously it's the only poem that anybody in the whole entire wedding party had read was by Rudyard, and so finally he's like, "Down here we call that bullshit." So that was the end of that. It was like, okay, it's time to dance now. So. Things did not progress well after that night. But anyway, that's the secret to a good party. Well, if you can't invite Jody G, you need some kind of element of danger. And Holly Lang, who has like done such an amazing job of running this book festival, is super. But she's super nervous, especially about the 3 of us. I think because the last time I was in this church building, I was with my really good friend, my dear, dear friend William Dunlap over there, great artist, great writer, and my good friend Roy Blunt Jr., and we were talking about possums because we were running out of stuff to say, and we'd all, weirdly enough, had, you know, Bill had painted a possum, Roy and I had written extensively on possums. One of my most popular gardening gun columns was on possums. You'd be amazed at how many people have possum stories. The mail I got after that is astonishing. Anyway, so Bill had previously, for a good cause, for a charity for this museum whose board we were on, had invented a opossum cocktail. So we thought, well, you know, we'll take the cocktail up there as a prop, because then if we drink it, we might even be more interesting. Well, we found out that we were like, oh my God. I mean, it was a huge scandal that we had this booze in an open container in the church house, even though it was Saturday at noon or whatever. And I did make a point of this in the introduction to my new book. It was a little ironic, but that's the great thing about living in the South, because the ironies are just like abounding, and you, as a writer, you just don't even have to do anything but sort of look out the window. And on that particular, like right before we had our vodka in this delicious, I put the recipe in the book, by the way, you can get Bill's possum cocktail. I mean, if it was okay with the Methodists, I would serve it in here, but I don't want to get in trouble. So, the week before, our esteemed Governor Bryant, had signed a bill saying it's okay to bring a handgun into church, and he did so with his own personal Glock on top of his family Bible while he's signing the bill. But God forbid we should have some vodka. So I'm just to irritate whoever got mad. I thought I'd present this gift to my esteemed editor. It's not open, y'all. It's not open. No open containers up in here. And it's okay if you have guns, just don't point them at us.
We got a couple of straws.
Let's see. All right, we're running out of time, which might be a good thing.
Well, one of the things that Dave and I wanted to say, and I think John could chime in on this too, is that, one thing as we're all kind of learning lessons and facing down our past, and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum here is a great example of that, we do want to make the point that the magazine is not just all about white people pursuits and Bloody Marys and quail hunts and stuff. I've got an upcoming profile of my former Vogue colleague, Andre Leon Talley, who's this towering figure in fashion, but also who has an incredibly moving life story and talks really openly about the racism that he dealt with coming up through the fashion world, where he was really the only black person in a position remotely of his kind of power. And there's a new documentary about him, which is the occasion for this piece, called The Gospel According to Andre. And I'm really happy that we're doing that and allowing Andre to have such a sort of platform. I mean, I was with him one time, and I make reference to this in the piece, but it's more Andre's story, but I was with him one time when we were doing a profile of Estee Lauder for so many complicated reasons, all of which had to do with money, not because Estee Lauder's face or body needed to be in the magazine, so sorry. But anyway, and she was a huge pain, but they had to get some...
I had to cut like 2 paragraphs out of
I'm
if
still,
you can tell, there's a little bit of...
I'm still a little raw from this.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare. But anyway, so Estee does supported Condé Nast at that point. So she... greeted Andre at the airport. He flew back in from Paris. They used to, believe it or not, have a direct flight to Raleigh-Durham, and he brought all these couture clothes that had been whipped up for old Estee to pose in, and he was met with armed guards when he walked off the plane because she was going to spend the night with his grandmother who had raised him, and she was dying, and Estee did not want those clothes in a black person's house. It was like, whoa. And that was, y'all, in 1992. It's not like it was in 65 or 75 or even 85. So I'm really glad we're putting that piece in. My favorite line in the current piece about an African-American birder.
Yeah, Drew Lanham from South Carolina. He says he pursues the whitest hobby that any African-American man could. And one of his rules is never go birding in a hoodie.
He has a sense of humor, this birder.
Yeah. He also has a Bronco 2, an old classic. I don't know if you guys know cars, but an old classic Bronco 2, and he bought it from a hunt club, and it's camouflaged. He calls it the Incon Negro mobile. Anyway, but it's good. It's about birding, but it's about race. And it's poetry, really, and it has it's the kind of story that I love because it's not screaming with a microphone, it's just putting it out there and relating to the readers, and it's just that he's an amazing character, an amazing man, so those are the stories that stick with you, and you really are proud to do.
We have 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, we do.
John, do you want to say anything else?
I just have one. I had the great privilege of interviewing John Lewis for David, who is an American saint, and in a genuine sense. I mean, he's like Saint Stephen. He was willing to shed his blood in the streets to die for an idea, and is really a remarkable figure. I've been lucky in my life to spend time with a lot of people who were once powerful and might be powerful. I get gooey around very few of them. John Lewis is one, because he used his body to change history. And we had a wonderful interview he's an incredibly accessible man, but it was about the South as he had known it. And of course, he's been representing Atlanta now for 30 years, 32 years in the House. But that was an interesting first call. I'd like to interview the congressman for Garden and Gun. But he totally got it. And I actually commend it, not because of what I said, because I just asked 3 questions, but because of what he said. And his idea that there is always the capacity and possibility for grace. And if someone who was nearly beaten in the streets of Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi, who trained in Nashville, who stuttered as a child and had to learn how to speak by preaching to the chickens at his family's sharecropper farm in Troy County, Alabama, to have gone in that sphere. People who think that the political life of the country has never been worse. I don't know if you all have heard that down here, but you might have. There are no red hats here, I notice. I just always refer to him as, if within the last half century in our native region, we lived under functional apartheid. So things do change and can change suddenly, never as quickly as one would like, but women have not yet voted for 100 years in this country. It'll be 100 years next time. 3 years ago, gay Americans did not have the right to participate in the civic ritual of marriage until 3 years ago. And people say all the time, well, gay rights is moving so fast. I've never heard a single gay person tell me that those rights are moving too fast. So these are not partisan points. I voted for Republicans and Democrats, plan to continue to. But one of the great things, and if Southerners understand this in our bones, I think, is that history can move very quickly.
Well, with that,
and Julia still does not move very quickly when she files.
just had to get that in there. No, but I do want to give Dave a shout out because he has given writers like me and like John. I mean, there are not that many. I mean, we John and I are part of a shrinking profession. Magazines are dying. I mean, half the magazines I used to write for don't exist anymore. And so I'm grateful. Y'all can go next door and see him in a minute. I'm very grateful to Dave for providing and to the magazine for providing a forum for writers like me and photographers. I mean, the other thing that's like a technical point that might not even notice is that paper in magazines is getting thinner and thinner because it's so expensive. And I mean, I looked at a reproduction of my own garden in a magazine and did not recognize it because you couldn't really see. I mean, like the paper wasn't thick enough for the colors to saturate. So Garden and Gun is hanging in there and giving us a literal quality piece of paper, and something to hold in your hand. But it's also, I think, important that the kind of stories that John was talking about, that Dave was talking about, even my goofy column, get told. So, do we have any minutes left? Does anybody have, you want one
they're
question,
circling
two
the wagon.
questions?
Any questions?
No?
1, 2? Anybody?
Yes. This is the brown water in Greenville really does freak people out. I mean,
me included.
I know he just wrote a piece for Delta magazine about running the tap for the first time, and he came to Greenville at the Hot Tamale Festival and the water's brown.
I was like, usually this is what happens when I put bourbon in it, not straight from the tap.
It just makes us all richer, as you know, Benji, in spirit, not in dollars. But no, but the bookstore at home used to carry bottles of brown water just from the tap, and it had all these famous writers on the label, like drink the water and you might become, I don't know, William Faulkner. So I always thought if I ever started a bookstore in Greenville, and I just might, I should call it Brown Water Books. So, all right, thank you all so much.